Hello everyone, welcome to Climate Astrologer Witness today. This is a rather impromptu video. I made one, I don't know, a month ago or so, and I didn't like it. So I'm starting again, and I'm feeling really good today because I took my bike out fairly early. Didn't do that far, I'm not a big long biker, 6 miles maybe, but I'm ready to go. I did it early before the heat started. Yeah, it's like 95 right now. So what I'm going to do today is combine some information on Pluto with some non-astrological material. I'm going to combine uh, Jeff Green's Evolutionary Astrology. I'm going to read part of that with Jared Diamond's book. I have got notes from it. The book's upstairs. And also The Great Turning by David Korten. Now, David Korten's book and Jared Diamond's book are a bit older. David Korten's book is from 2006. It's still very on point, but there's a lot of updating. A lot of time has passed. A lot more destruction of the earth, okay, etc. But I think that's pretty good for today. Hopefully I can get through it all. It's not too long. So I'm going to get started with Jeffrey Green. I'm reading first. Oh, I left my glasses upstairs. Oh, I was running really well too. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I have to sit this way, kind of at the edge, because there's too much light coming in from the window. I can never really get a good position. Can't really see with all that light shining in here. Okay, so again, from Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul by Jeff Green. Okay, Pluto in Capricorn, and I'm choosing that because the United States has Pluto in Capricorn, and I might even touch on Pluto in the second house because that's in here too. The United States chart has Pluto in Capricorn in the second house, and we just had our Pluto return, as most astrologers here would know, and there's a section on the transit through the second house, but we'll see. I might have to put that off. Okay. Now remember, as I'm reading this, I mean, he covers the mundane aspect of this pretty well. In other words, the astrology of countries, our country, pretty well in the beginning of this. But every time he's referring to a person, also remember you can apply that to the country and the government, Capricorn, okay? So, as in all natural cardinal houses, Pluto in the 10th, or Capricorn, represents a condition wherein an entire chapter or cycle of evolutionary development has come to a close and another has just begun within the recent past. So why he's saying that, for those who are not that familiar with astrology, is because as planets transit from the left side of the chart, the left point, and move around the entire chart, each angle counts as a turning point. So, as you can see with the United States chart, let's see where that, oh, we got this. Yeah, there we go. So this is the first house, the first point. Every point is significant to a different stage, the 10th house, Capricorn's house, okay? But here we have Pluto in the second house for the United States, okay? But it's back there, 250, 246 years, 250 years. I forget the exact number, sorry. But that's the whole cycle of Pluto in going throughout every sign. So it's gone through every sign for the United States, every house, every area of life, and it's back. Now it's moved out of there, of course, we know, into Aquarius. But we'll get to that. Okay, now, let me continue. So, a new evolutionary stage. This evolutionary development can apply to countries as well as individuals. For example, the US chart has Pluto in Capricorn, South Node in Aquarius, and the North Node in Leo. The rebellion against British rule, South Node in Aquarius, was necessary in order for this country to take charge of its own destiny, North Node in Leo. In so doing, a new evolutionary cycle began, Pluto in Capricorn. The pyramid reality structure of the North Node in Leo seems to be reflected in the fact that so much of what happens in the world depends on what happens in the United States. We did become an empire, and that's why. Okay, I'm not sure if he views it that way. I probably read this a long time ago, but we'll continue. The U.S. was destined to play the international role, South Node in Aquarius, as the leader of the free world, North Node in Leo with respect to Pluto and Capricorn. Individuals who have Pluto in the 10th house or Capricorn have been learning the evolutionary lesson of how to establish their individuality and authority within a culture or society. Any society must establish laws, regulations, customs, and taboos in which each individual within the society must conform so that the society can function as an integrated and stable whole. These laws and customs may evolve naturally over time, may be established through a consensus of the society's members, or they may be imposed upon the society by those in power. In any case, a society or culture represents collective authority that dictates how individuals are expected to conduct themselves. Each nation or culture has a philosophical tradition derived from the 9th house. Remember, philosophical position. 9th house or Sagittarius. That is the foundation upon which the laws, regulations, and customs are formulated. In the 10th house of Capricorn, these philosophies become institutionalized and politicized. So let me put it this way. When somebody, say, thousands of years ago, came up with a concept, a thought, a philosophy about life and people and what comes after, maybe, right? They're philosophizing. Eventually, as that gets discussed and shared over time, eventually they turn that into a set system. That's Capricorn. So it goes from Sagittarius, which is the spirit of wondering, the spirit of thought about such things of life, and then it moves to a broader number, and people hold on to that and they use it to organize their living situation as a group. Okay? And as time passes, that may work very well for a while, maybe many years, maybe decades, maybe hundreds of years, maybe a couple thousand. But eventually, things change. Remember, there's nothing more permanent than change. Iced coffee. So, these laws and customs may evolve naturally over time, may be established through a consensus of the society's members, or they may be imposed upon the society by those in power. In any case, I think I read that. In any case, a society or culture represents collective authority that dictates how individuals are expected to conduct themselves. Okay, so we did that. Examples include the philosophy of democracy and religious freedom, 9th house, evolving into capitalism, 10th house, or the philosophy of Marxism, 9th house, leading to communism and atheism, 10th house. In this manner, a nation or a society creates traditions and forms a national identity. The national identity being we follow this and this, these rules, etc. This is who we are as a in the world, public, 10th house. Okay. In the same way, individuals who have Pluto in the 10th house of Capricorn have needed to learn how to link or integrate their own philosophy and identity within the framework of a society, culture, or nation. This evolutionary necessity and development represents the progressive socialization of the individual, which began in Libra, the beginning of socialization, or the 7th house, just as a country has borders that define its relationship or position with respect to other countries, so too does the individual have a position, place, or function within his or her country. Each individual has boundaries, parameters, or limitations relative to his or her social position or function within a society, as does a country function within a global system. As a result, 10th house Pluto individuals have had to learn and will continue to learn how to define their individuality through their social position or function. And that's what the United States did. They learned how to define the nation's individuality through its social position or function. In order for this to occur, they must learn how the society works. So the United States had to learn how the global society worked in order to do that. If I have a desire to do this or that, to become this or that, how does society allow me to accomplish my goals? So for the individual, yes, you have to learn about the rules and laws in your country, in your state, in your, city, okay, in order to be able to use your innate skills and talents, and then to learn more skills, learned skills, and apply it to your life, and then incorporate it into the larger picture of society, right? And sometimes many people find this difficult, especially when they don't get a lot of good support when they're young. Something's missing. Okay, I could go into that further, but let's go. Okay. By learning to operate within society, these individuals have also been learning related lessons in discipline, self-determination, and submission to a higher authority. Because they have been learning how to establish that which characterizes their individuality, values, beliefs, desires, and needs, and to link their individual purpose to a social purpose, they have also been learning lessons in social and emotional maturity. So Cancer, it's all about the emotional needs of the person and how you are either supported or not supported within a small immediate family group or within your small local group, neighborhood, town, village. Okay. But on the larger stage, you need to broaden that to work within a system and understand that on a broader term. And the emotional maturity comes where, you go out in the society, and I've said this before, a lot of people don't have a strong enough ego to be able to get out in the world, go get a job, and take it when you're not doing something right. And the authority tells you, and yeah, a lot of times the authority doesn't say it very nice, right? But it's hard sometimes for certain people to be out there in the world and have the emotional maturity to take it when somebody corrects them or gives them rules and regulations that comes up against their emotional self, right? And so we have to grow up and harden a little bit, to be able to do that. Now, we can see that in society, there's multiple levels of people with that ability. Okay, it's kind of compartmentalization. That's what it really is. You're compartmentalizing your own emotional needs or reactions in order to function out in the world. You can't like crybaby and because something bad happened at work and you go home and but then again that could be overdone, right? You can't constantly compartmentalize so that when you go home you have no ability to relate emotionally. And that can happen in this kind of a situation. It's all a balance, okay? So keep that in mind. Because each nation has its own vibration that is created through its laws, customs, and taboos, each of us is born into a nation that reflects our karmic and evolutionary needs. Okay. Just as the fourth house in Cancer describes our experiences with our parents and early environment, the 10th house in Capricorn describes our extended family environment, the country or culture in which we grow up. Just as our self-image is conditioned by our parents, so much of our sense of social identity is conditioned by the nation in which we grow up. 10th house Pluto individuals then have had and will have an intensified evolutionary need that demands they learn to become socially responsible people through the social functions that they are karmically destined to perform. The natural evolutionary condition and karmic lines of development will correlate to those functions. These individuals will be born into countries that best reflect the ways in which they can learn these lessons. A majority of people with Pluto in the 10th house or Capricorn have desired positions of social power or status. It would be mostly, in our modern times right now, it would be people with Pluto born in the 10th house because the only people born with Pluto and Capricorn now would be people born around 2008 and after. So they're pretty young yet, but they're coming. So hang on. Okay. Many have occupied positions of power in past incarnations. Power in this context is relative and based on evolutionary capacity and karmic dynamics. In order to accomplish their ends, these individuals thoroughly learned how the system works, using Pluto's innate ability to penetrate to the basic structure or essence of any subject. In the 10th house, this means society or social systems. Many people with Pluto in the 10th house or Capricorn have learned to manipulate the system to their advantage, just like countries can do, okay, and have done. They have done so in order to realize their ambitions to get to the top. These individuals often believe that their ends justify the means. Let me go back to that. So with Capricorn ruling the second house of the United States and Pluto being there, they've realized their ambition to get to the top of their value system, but also finance. Okay. It's not just their second house, but it's Capricorn, which is society's global. We're an empire. I mean, people don't understand the connotation of that. It's not really a positive thing. How do you get to be the king of the mountain? You push everybody else off. People want to think of the United States as a white knight. And to some extent, we have been, but it balanced out negatively in a lot of ways, and we could go into a lot of examples of that. I'm gonna have to cover that more in depth, but so Pluto and Capricorn in the second house, the world runs on the U.S. dollar, and they call it basically the petrodollar, money and oil. Okay. Okay. These individuals often believe that their ends justifies the means. In extreme cases, this dynamic can lead to blind ambition. An example of this extreme is found in former President Richard Nixon, who has Pluto in the 10th house. He was willing to do anything to be in power and stay in power. And his example then is pretty overshadowed by things that are going on these days, right? The desire for social power or status also reflects the fact that these individuals need to be in control of their position within society, rather than allowing society to control them. Pluto in the 10th house has made the individual aware of his or her power and powerlessness, and what symbolizes power and powerlessness in a social context. The nature of a society determines the ways and means through which social position is achieved. Thus, if the system is corrupt, unjust, or manipulative, the individual who seeks power and position within that system is likely to do so in a corrupt, unjust, or manipulative way. In so doing, they claim that this is just the way it works. And I hear a lot, it's always been like that. That's the way we've always done things. The stronger military always wins. And that's okay. That makes it okay that you beat up on somebody less powerful and take. Okay. And relieve themselves of any personal responsibility or national responsibility. The potential karmic and evolutionary problems that this can lead to are twofold. Becoming overly identified with one's career in a personal way, positions of status, etc., and manipulating and using others for one's own ends. Both can lead to abuse of power, especially if the person's entire sense of emotional and physical security is linked to his or her social power, career, and status. Okay, so again, the United States has Pluto and Capricorn. When this occurs, such individuals or even entire nations may use all means at their disposal to defend themselves against any usurping of their power, position, or status. The effort to maintain power or position at any cost can assume very ugly forms. Nixon's response to Watergate investigation is an example of this. A recent example of a nation acting under the banner of national interest was the U.S. invasion of Grenada. A grosser example would be the invasion of Czechoslovakia by the Soviet Union. The rationales used to justify such actions are always self-serving and pious. The history of humankind is a sad testimonial to these facts. War, invasions, and defense against invasion seem to be the rule rather than the exception in human history. The struggle among nations to dominate and be dominated predates the beginnings of history itself. Yet another evolutionary lesson, the key word, evolutionary, okay? And yet another evolutionary lesson of the 10th house Pluto is to learn how to be responsible for one's own actions. Individuals who have manipulated others to achieve their own ends will come into this life with subconscious guilt patterns as a result of prior errors. The same principles apply to nations. Even today, the German people feel guilt in their national soul because of the Holocaust created by Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Hitler had an 8th house Pluto in Gemini, conjunct Neptune. His south node was in Capricorn, in the 3rd. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm going to read that again. Hitler had an 8th house Pluto in Gemini, conjunct Neptune. His south node was in Capricorn, in the 3rd. South node being what we did in another life, supposedly. Okay. It's the easier route. Okay. And it's not always positive if we only hang out in that way of expressing ourselves. It's too easy, and it's like habitual habit patterns. You get caught up in it, and you don't try to change and transform from the negatives of what you know. You don't try to expand beyond that. Okay. The ruler of the south node, Saturn, was in the 10th house in Leo. The north node was in Cancer in the 9th house, ruled by Capricorn moon conjunct Jupiter in the south node. Later, I will use Hitler's chart to illustrate the points covered in the first 2 chapters. The guilt occurs because the standards of conduct inherent in Pluto are intensified in the 10th house or Capricorn. No matter how it is rationalized, the abuse of power is not ultimately right. All of us have a deep inner sense of what is ultimately right and wrong. We may not know exactly why something is right or wrong, or derives from this our judgment derives from this inner sense of intuition. Commonly, then, many 10th house Pluto individuals will come into this life with a deep sense of inherent guilt that cannot be rationally explained by current life experiences. This situation will only occur when there have been negative or misguided behavioral responses to the evolutionary impulse of 10th house Pluto. This guilt can have a profound inhibiting effect on the current incarnation, so much so that these individuals often feel that they do not deserve anything beyond what they already have. Okay. Interesting. They feel resigned to their lot in life. In this way, they are punishing themselves for prior mistakes and attempting to atone for prior sins. The greatest frustration occurs because many do not know why they find themselves in this condition. Karmically, many will be blocked by society from fulfilling their goals. The doors seem to be closed. Others block themselves and close their own doors. That happens a lot in life. This condition enforces reflection, through which the individual can become aware of the inner motivations and dynamics that created this situation. Reflection can lead to deep depression and feelings of futility, of an utter lack of power, an utter lack of being in control of life. Often these individuals' parents will be stern disciplinarians. Oh, wait a minute, I said that wrong. Often these individuals will draw to themselves a family situation in which one or both of the parents will be stern disciplinarians, imposing a rigid standard of conduct on these individuals as children. Or they may have a parent who leaves the scene or rejects the responsibility of parenting. This situation leads the individual early on to reflect upon the actions of one or both parents and reflects their own evolutionary karmic need to judge themselves relative to their own standards of conduct. Often, these individuals have been heavily judgmental in the past, judging others against whatever standards of conduct and behavior they identified with at the time. A primary lesson of the 10th house Pluto has also been self-determination and self-discipline. Self-determination means identifying one's goals and abilities, capacities, and desires, and actualizing them through one's own efforts. The need is to identify one's function within society and to actualize the potential of that function through the ways and means described by society. This process requires discipline and commitment to a sustained effort. Many 10th house Pluto individuals may Many 10th house Pluto individuals have not learned this lesson because the evolutionary impulse is quite new. Yet their pre-existing patterns of identity association will revolve around the need to identify with a career as a primary focus of their sense of individual completion, meaning, and security. Many have settled for less in their most recent prior lives, either because they did not learn the appropriate procedures that would have led to the realization of their ambitions, or they refused to make the necessary effort, or both. Coming into this life, these lessons will remain. Some individuals who have had prior life experiences will go through cycles of pessimism, depression, bitterness, spitefulness, and jealousy of those who are in positions of authority in this life. They may be unable to define or accept the limits of their social capacity and be unable to follow the prescribed ways and means of actualizing what capacity they do have. Guilt can occur through the inner awareness of their failure to utilize the potential or guilt and can be projected outward if they blame the stifled conditions of their lives on society or on others in general. That's not to say that society doesn't have an effect on people. I mean, we are small within systems, within systems, within systems. Okay. And yes, it takes an awareness, a consciousness that has to come about. Many people, as you go through life, you run into situations, people who can open up that awareness for you. But doesn't happen the same way for everybody at the same age, in the same way. And sometimes, if it happens first when you're young and you miss it, or you don't get the whole picture, hopefully it can happen again. A particular teacher, a particular relative, or event in the world opens you up to the broader aspects that make you think more about your place in the world and that you're not just yourself in a little spot and you don't have any interconnection. You must come to learn that there's a broader connection that you need to make and then follow some step-by-step processes to get where you want to go, okay? But if you're in an environment where nobody is able to do that, or very, very few people, and that there really is an oppressiveness in the environment, it makes it very difficult. Okay, so in truth, the responsibility for such conditions is their own. Often, the parents reinforce their guilt because they judge their children's shortcoming against their own standards of conduct. On a more positive level, those who have mastered the lessons of self-determination, self-discipline, and the ways and means that a society prescribes to realize ambition, capacity, and social function have held meaningful social positions in their lives, in other lives. Because they have learned these lessons before, these individuals can actualize the social function for which they are evolutionarily and karmically destined with little effort. The roles that they have played and can play, large or small, commonly have a positive and transformative impact either within their specific area of work or within society as a whole. Those who have learned to conduct themselves in relation to transcultural and timeless standards of conduct, or have at least determined to attempt to conduct themselves in this way, can play roles that inspire others to improve their own lives. This impact can be small or large depending on the evolutionary and karmic signature of the individual. In certain cases, this impact has transcended the borders of the individual's native country and touched others in other lands. A classic example is Paramhansa Yogananda. Yogananda had Pluto conjunct Neptune in Gemini in the 10th house, South Node in Scorpio in the 3rd, conjunct Uranus, North Node in the Taurus in the 9th, and its planetary ruler Venus in Sagittarius in the 4th house, conjunct Mercury. The world role that he was destined to play took him to many lands in order to bridge cultural gaps through the teachings that he expressed. With an opposition from Pluto to Venus, it is interesting to note that he had a deep personal desire to seclude himself in the Himalayas that went unresolved in his lifetime. He made the statement that after leaving this life, he would reincarnate hundreds of years later to fulfill that unresolved desire. Another example of 10th house Pluto individual whose life and work transcended national borders, albeit on a different level, is Agatha Christie. Christie also had Pluto conjunct Neptune in the 10th house with South Node in Sagittarius in the 4th house conjunct Mars. The planetary ruler of the North Node, Jupiter, was in Aquarius retrograde in the 5th. The ruler of the North Node in Gemini in the 10th house, Mercury, was in Libra in the 2nd. Many of her mystery novels had international settings, and her books have been published in dozens of languages all over the world. Intrinsic to a mystery is the theme of right and wrong and the assumption that what is just and right will prevail in the end. Christie's writings express such standards of right and wrong. And if you look at the United States, that's part of the role the United States, tries to take in the world. With Saturn in the 10th, whereas Capricorn, Saturn's the ruler of Capricorn, but it's in the 2nd. Capricorn rules the 2nd. With the 10th house, Saturn, the United States tries to be the authority of the world, the responsible one in the world, on the world stage. And it's in the sign of Libra. Saturn in Libra is in its exaltation. It's the best sign for Saturn to be in. It's taking responsibility to balance the scales of justice. Okay, but that is not an easy task when you have Pluto and Capricorn. So that's a square, although it's not that close. Saturn is 12 or so of Libra, and the United States, Pluto and Capricorn is at 27 degrees. It's wide. It's a wide square. But squares are blocks or very challenging, conflicting positions or energies. Okay, so we'll go into that again maybe sometime. So, where did I leave off? I didn't mean to get into such deep astrological descriptions of people's charts for those of you who aren't really into astrology, if you're here. But as you can see, how it relates to Christie's writings, etc., and Yogananda. Okay, the world stage. Okay. Those individuals who have made an effort to learn the required evolutionary karmic lessons in the past will express natural leadership qualities at whatever evolutionary level to which they have evolved. They will be the embodiment of self-determination and can act as models for others who wish to motivate themselves in the same way. These individuals will understand that they are responsible for their own actions and will not use devious means of achieving their ambitions. Commonly, they will feel an intense contempt and dislike for those who resort to devious ways of realizing their goals and are not afraid to confront those who do use these tactics. The 10th house Pluto person thus exposes others to their motivations that make them operate as they do. In so doing, they have the potential to influence others toward a higher standard of conduct. That's kind of the ideal that the United States was going for. These individuals have commonly had a parent or parents who support, encourage, or understand what they must do with their lives. Sometimes one parent is supportive and the other is not. Sometimes the one that eventually comes around to see that the path that the individual must travel is right for them, even if it does not conform to the parent's wishes. In addition, the 10th house and Capricorn are the archetypes through which we all come to face with our own mortality and with time and space itself. So countries or empires have to come face to face with their own mortality also. Because why we live on a planet of limits, not a magical planet. And when a nation or civilization gets to the point of consuming its physical habitat or ecosystem out from under it, they have to do exactly what was just read here. 10th house and Capricorn are the archetypes through which we all come face to face with our own mortality and with time and space itself. We live on a physical planet, a real planet. You cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet. These archetypes produce the awareness that we have a certain time span in which to fulfill our destinies. Consequently, the 10th house Pluto individuals feel this awareness more acutely than those who do not have Pluto in this house or sign. Okay, I don't really want to get too much into, because they talk too much about specific people's charts, but I think you get the idea of how it relates to nation states. Okay, so now we want to go to David Korten. Okay. And this is from chapter 3, the imperative. Since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of, and since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. That quote is from Viktor E. Frankl. Excuse me. This troubled planet is a place of the most violent contrast. Those that receive the rewards are totally separated from those who shoulder the burdens. It is not a wise leadership. I bet you can't tell where that's come from, unless you're a Trekkie. Spock, the Cloudminders, Star Trek. Okay, I'm just going to read some pieces out of this book. Okay, a planet under crippling stress. Somewhere about the 1980s, we humans crossed an evolutionary threshold. The burden we place on the life support system of the planet passed beyond the sustainable limit. Well, it was really going in that direction long before that, but I think he means it was more obvious. Okay. The figures are sobering. Just since 1950, in barely more than 50 years, the global human population more than doubled from 2.6 billion persons in 1950 to 6.4 billion in 2005. And now we are at 8 billion in 2024. The value of the global economic output increased from 6.7 trillion in 1950 to 48 trillion in 2002. I forget what it is now. I've heard it, but I don't remember. As measured in constant US dollars. Got that? US dollars. The number of motor vehicles is 10 times what it was in 1950. Fossil fuel use is 5 times what it was. And global use of fresh water has tripled. Spending on advertising aimed primarily at getting 1.7 billion people, 27% of humanity, who currently enjoy material affluence to consume even more goods and services, was nearly 10 times greater in 2002 than in 1950. By 2002, humans were consuming food, materials, and energy at a rate of 1.2 Earth equivalent planets. We're at 1.7 now. The difference between human consumption and the regenerative capacity of Earth to Earth is made up by depleting natural capital of the planet. Let me read that again. The difference between human consumption and the regenerative capacity of Earth is made up by depleting the natural capital of the planet, both renewable capital like minerals and fossil fuels, and renewable capital like forests, fisheries, soil, water, and climate systems. The consequence is to extract a temporary and unsustainable subsidy from Earth to support current consumption at the expense of our children and their children for generations to come. This World Wildlife Fund regularly publishes a Living Planet Index that tracks the health of the world's forests, freshwater, ocean, and coastal ecosystems over time. This index declined by 37% over the 30-year period from 1970 to 2000. The index is unlikely to reach zero, a dead planet, because the planet will surely rid itself of the offending species long before this occurs. About 420 million people now live in countries that depend on imported food because they lack sufficient farmland per capita to feed their people. By 2025, this number could exceed 1 billion as population grows and the amount and quality of cropland declines. More than 500 million people now live in regions prone to chronic drought. This number is expected to grow as high as 3.4 billion by 2025. A combination of ecosystem disruption, malnutrition, a lack of access to clean water, and rapid movement of people and goods across ecological boundaries has spread devastating new diseases such as HIV/AIDS with unprecedented speed. Diseases like malaria and tuberculosis, once thought to be all but eradicated, are reasserting themselves in more virulent forms. Climatic disruptions and imminent end to the ready availability of cheaply extracted oil that has made many of our contemporary human excesses possible will accelerate the crisis and constrain our human capacity to address it. Climate disruption. So, global warming, climate change, the real word is climate disruption. The scientific consensus that climate change is real and is in substantial measure caused by human activity grows each year as the evidence becomes ever more compelling. The average global surface temperature increased by 0.6 degrees centigrade over the 20th century, with accelerating increases projected for the 21st century. Well, now, okay, so that was the 2000-ish. I think it was 0.8 was what I learned originally, but so we are probably, more than likely, from what I've been reading, at 1.5 already. Okay, and that's what we were supposed to try to keep under. I'm going to continue. The average global surface temperature, I read that. The warming is greatest in the northern hemisphere, particularly in the Arctic region, where the polar ice cap has thinned by 46% over 20 years and may begin melting entirely in the summer months as early as 2020. Yeah. The ocean thermals in the Atlantic that drive the Gulf Stream that warms Europe have
substantially weakened, creating concern that it may slow or stop entirely, with devastating consequences for European nations and particularly European agriculture. That's a big sentence right there, and he knew this then. I'm going to read that again. The ocean thermals in the Atlantic that drive the Gulf Stream that waters Europe have substantially weakened, creating concern that it may slow or stop entirely, with devastating consequences for European nations and particularly European agriculture, because it'll be too cold. So, climate disruption doesn't mean it gets warm everywhere. And yes, the Atlantic Meridional Oscillation Current has slowed a lot. And now scientists are very worried that it'll slow so much that these kinds of changes will add to the disruption. And eventually it could stop. Will it stop anytime soon? It's not like the day after tomorrow or whatever that movie was. It doesn't happen overnight or weeks. But that was the example that over decades, decades, not thousands of years or hundreds of years, it could stop by the 2040s, maybe, they said, possibly, or after, probably after. That is extremely a different place to live on. Okay. Even small increases in temperature can have major climatic effects. That's what people don't understand. As demonstrated by a steady increase over the past 5 decades in severe weather events such as major hurricanes, floods, and droughts. Globally, there were only 13 severe events in the 1950s. By comparison, 72 such events occurred during the first 9 years of the 90s. The cost of the damage caused has risen from roughly $3 billion annually in the 50s to $40 billion annually in the 1990s. Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, which ravaged the Gulf Coast of the United States and Mexico in 2005, are only a foretaste of what is to come. So, 40 billion in the 90s. Now, I put it here. I just want to make sure I have the right numbers, so I'm going to look this up that I sent to myself. Hold on. So last year, in 2023, the amount for the year of climate-related catastrophes was, it was right here. Come on. Oh, I think it was 92 billion. 92 billion last year. So every year it goes up. And so far this year, it's been 25 billion. 25 billion so far. We're only in June. So, yeah. $1 billion disasters have gone up. Just look at the information. Just look at the stats. And it's going to get worse. Okay. I'm going to skip to this other part. Okay, maybe that's for next time. All right, let me look in the contents. I forgot what page that was. There's so much good stuff in this book. And his other book, When Corporations Rule the World, is excellent. I'm going to read out of that next, and I'll show you the development of corporations in this country. Where is it? Sorry. Only one farther in the map. Oh. Okay. I do have this section marked off
but I'm not going to cross it. Yeah, we got sports in the background now, so folks, I'm sorry. I love the way this guy writes. He's excellent. Well, maybe I'll have to use this next time. I'm going to go to the other things that I was going to read. I did copy some notes from Jared Diamond's Collapse. Okay. I think there's more to that title. I'm sorry. I don't have it right here. But Jared Diamond. Okay, Collapse. So this is what he, it's quite a bit, but I don't know. I'll read some of it. It seems to me that the most serious environmental problems facing past and present societies fall into a dozen groups. 8 of the 12 were significant already in the past, while 4, energy, photosynthesis ceiling, toxic chemicals, and atmospheric changes, become serious only recently. The first of the 12 consists of destruction or losses of natural resources, the next 3 involving sealing on natural resources. The 3 after that consist of harmful things that we produce or move around, and the last 2 are population issues. Let's begin with the natural resources that we are destroying or losing. Natural habitats, wild food sources, biological diversity, and soil. At an accelerating rate, we are destroying natural habitats or else converting them to human-made habitats, such as cities, villages, farmlands, and pastures. Don't be thinking the agriculture that we do isn't natural. Oh, roads and golf courses, throw that in there. The natural habitat whose losses have provoked the most discussion are forests, wetlands, and coral reefs, and the ocean bottom. As I mentioned in the preceding chapter, more than half of the world's original area of forest has already been converted to other uses. That's a big deal. And at present, conservation rates, 1/4 of the forests that remain will become converted within the next half century. Those losses of forests represent losses for us humans, especially because forests provide us with timber and other raw materials. Yes, you can have some timber because it's a renewable resource, but you have to let it do that. You have to let it renew. Okay, sorry. Timber and other raw materials, and because they provide us with so-called ecosystem services such as, remember that word, ecosystem services, such as protecting our watersheds, protecting soil against erosion, constituting essential step in the water cycle that generates much of our rainfall, and providing habitat for most terrestrial plants and animal species. Deforestation or the major factor in all of the collapses of was the major factor in most collapses in past societies. In addition, as discussed in Chapter 1 in connection with the Montana issues, I remember reading that. It was about a farmland situation, but I forget some of it now. Chapter 1 in connection with the Montana issues of concerns to us are not only forest destruction and conversion, but also changes in the structure of woodland habitat that do remain, among other things, that changed structures result in changed fire regimes that put forests, chaparral, woodland, and savannas at greater risk of frequent but catastrophic fires. Infrequent but catastrophic fires. And what have we got now? Frequent catastrophic fires. Okay, because his book was written a couple decades ago, I think it was, or maybe it was in the early 2000s. I should have put it down here, but I forgot. Let me read that last part again. Let's see. We'll go back. Okay. So they're talking about the Montana situation. It had to do with agriculture or something. The forest destruction and conversion to agricultural land or pasture land. But
Also changes in the structure of wooded habitat that do remain, among other things, that changed structure results in changed fire regimes that put forests, chaparral, woodland, and savannas at greater risk of infrequent but catastrophic fires. So, okay, I think this is going to be pretty good for today. There are some other things I wanted to address, but I'm going to have to do another video for that. I don't want to be too long. The first reading was pretty long, but I hope I was able to make a connection there, having how astrology not makes things happen, but it reflects what's within us and what's within our societies. Okay. Yeah, I didn't dress up today. Like I said, I felt pretty good because I took my bike out early. And now I have to go do some housework. I have to mop my floor and do some other things. So I hope that was helpful. And um, I'm going to put the titles to these books in the notes, or at least in the comments section. And everyone have a good day and hope to see you back and visit here again. Thank you and take care.